Okay, so you sent over some fascinating stuff on Second Maccabees.
Yeah,
Not exactly light reading,
right.
but definitely a lot of intrigue and historical significance in there. Ancient letters, tales of divine intervention,
Right.
whole lot of political drama.
Hmm.
So I'm ready to dive in, but
Yeah.
where do we even begin with all this?
Well, it's important to understand that Second Maccabees, it's not like some of the other books in the Bible,
Okay.
not universally accepted as scripture.
Right.
It's what scholars call deuterocanonical,
Uh-huh.
which basically means that some branches of Christianity include it in their canon and others don't.
Yeah.
But,
Right.
regardless of its canonical status, it
Yeah.
offers a really unique and valuable perspective on this pivotal period in Jewish history.
So it's kind of like a bonus chapter then,
Yeah.
adding more depth to the story.
Right.
But what exactly is this story about? Give me the Spark Notes version.
All right, so imagine a time when your religious freedom is threatened, your traditions are outlawed, and your very identity is under attack.
Wow.
That's essentially the situation that the Jewish people faced under the Seleucid Empire. Second Maccabees tells the story of their resistance, their struggle to preserve their faith,
Okay.
and ultimately their triumph against, seemingly insurmountable odds.
Okay, I'm hooked already. So we're talking about the Maccabean revolt then, right?
You got it.
I know it's connected to Hanukkah, but beyond that, things get a little fuzzy for me.
You're on the right track. So the book actually opens with a letter sent from the Jewish community in Jerusalem to their fellow Jews in Egypt,
Okay.
encouraging them to celebrate Hanukkah.
Why?
It's like a direct link, between this historical event and the holiday we celebrate today.
That's amazing. I never realized there was such a direct connection, like between the book and Hanukkah.
Yeah.
But so this letter, is it just a simple holiday greeting, or is there more to it?
It's much more than a greeting. This letter actually recounts the events leading up to the Maccabean revolt, highlighting the religious persecution that the Jewish people endured and emphasizing the importance of remembering and celebrating their hard-won victory.
So it's like a call to action almost, like,
Yeah.
don't take your freedom for granted.
Exactly. Don't take it for granted.
Yeah.
And within this letter, we're introduced to some pretty key figures, including these two guys named Jason and Menelaus.
Okay.
Now, they were rivals vying for the position of high priest, but their ambitions led them to embrace Hellenistic culture
Okay.
and try to impose it on the Jewish people.
Wait, so these guys were essentially selling out their own people for personal gain.
It was a complex time.
Wow.
Not all Jews opposed Hellenistic influence, and some saw assimilation as a way to survive,
Right.
in a changing world.
Yeah.
But for many, it was seen as a betrayal of their faith and traditions.
Right.
And the actions of Jason and Menelaus definitely fueled that unrest that eventually erupted into open rebellion.
Okay, so we've got power struggles, we've got religious tensions,
Yeah.
a society on the brink of change.
It's all there.
I can see why this period is so ripe for storytelling.
Yeah.
But you mentioned divine intervention earlier.
Yes.
What's the deal with that?
So one of the most striking features of Second Maccabees is its emphasis on God's active involvement in human affairs.
Okay.
And we see this throughout the book,
Huh.
but an early example is the story of the sacred fire.
Okay, this sounds intriguing.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
So centuries before the Maccabean revolt, when the Jews were exiled to Persia, the priests hid some of the altar fire from the temple.
Okay.
Now, miraculously, this fire transformed into a thick liquid.
A thick liquid. That sounds like something out of a fantasy novel.
I know.
Yeah.
It definitely has that kind of mythical quality to it, but the author presents this as historical fact. And years later, when Nehemiah was rebuilding the temple, he sent a delegation to find this hidden fire.
Right.
They rediscovered this liquid, and upon using it to sprinkle the altar, a great blaze ignited,
Wow.
signifying divine approval.
Talk about a dramatic reveal. But what's the deeper meaning here? Is this just a cool story, or is there a bigger message?
It's definitely a cool story, but it also speaks to the enduring strength of Jewish faith and tradition, even in exile. Even when the temple lay in ruins, the presence of God remained.
Right.
That fire, transformed but not extinguished, symbolizes that continuity, that unwavering belief.
So it's a message of hope and resilience, even in the face of adversity.
Exactly. Sets the stage for the rest of the book, foreshadowing this idea that even when all seems lost, faith and divine intervention can turn the tide.
Okay.
And this theme is further emphasized in the next chapter with the story of Heliodorus.
Oh, I read about him. Wasn't he the guy who tried to raid the temple treasury?
That's the one. King Seleucus sent Heliodorus, his treasurer, to Jerusalem with orders to confiscate the temple's wealth.
Really?
Yeah, it was a blatant act of sacrilege, motivated by greed and a disregard for Jewish religious beliefs.
So this Heliodorus, he just waltzes into Jerusalem thinking he can plunder the temple without any consequences.
He definitely underestimated the power of the God of Israel. So Heliodorus meets with the high priest, Onias,
Right.
who tries to reason with him, explaining that these funds are dedicated to widows, orphans, and the most vulnerable members of society.
Okay.
But Heliodorus, he's determined to carry out the king's orders.
I bet that didn't go over so well. Didn't something dramatic happen when he tried to enter the treasury?
You could say that. As Heliodorus is about to enter the treasury,
Yeah.
a magnificent horseman clad in gold armor appears out of thin air, flanked by 2 angels.
Wow.
This heavenly trio, they charge toward Heliodorus, striking him down, leaving him lying there helpless and terrified.
That's an entrance. So what's the message here? Don't mess with the temple.
It's definitely a powerful statement about God's protection of his people and his holy places.
Right.
And a reminder that even earthly rulers, with all their power and authority, are ultimately subject to a higher power.
Okay.
And it's not just a show of force. The angels actually speak to Heliodorus, urging him to repent and proclaim the majesty of God.
So wait, does he actually listen to them? What happens next?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting.
Okay.
He actually does repent.
Wow.
He goes back to the king,
Yeah.
a changed man, and testifies to the power of the God of Israel.
Talk about a conversion story. But I'm guessing this period of relative peace doesn't last too long.
You're right.
Yeah.
This is just the calm before the storm. The arrival of Antiochus Epiphanes marks a dramatic shift in the narrative,
Okay.
ushering in an era of unprecedented religious persecution for the Jewish people.
Okay, so we've gone from corrupt officials to a king who's about to make things much worse.
Right.
I'm sensing a rebellion brewing.
Yeah.
But we'll have to save that for part 2 of our deep dive.
Welcome back. Last time we left off with the ominous arrival of Antiochus V and Epiphanes.
Yeah.
He's often portrayed as like the ultimate villain in this story. But I always find it helpful to remember that, he was a product of his time.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Yeah.
What was going on back then that might explain, his actions?
Well, Antiochus was obsessed with Hellenistic culture.
Okay.
He saw it as like the key to unifying his vast empire.
Right.
And, he saw the Jews' unique faith and traditions as a threat to that vision.
So instead of embracing diversity, he wanted everyone to conform to his ideal of Greek culture.
Exactly.
Oh.
And he wasn't exactly subtle about it either. He outlawed Jewish practices like circumcision and Sabbath observance. And, he even went so far as to desecrate the temple in Jerusalem, dedicating it to Zeus.
That's awful. I can only imagine how devastating that must have been for the Jewish people.
Right.
Talk about like a direct attack on their faith and identity.
It was a turning point.
Yeah.
Many Jews who had previously been willing to, accommodate some aspects of Hellenistic culture,
Right.
they saw this as a step too far.
Yeah.
It sparked a wave of resistance, both passive and active.
So how did they resist? Did they try to reason with Antiochus? Or did they immediately jump to armed rebellion?
There were different forms of resistance.
Okay.
The sources you shared, they highlight these stories of some incredibly brave individuals who chose to defy Antiochus, even if it meant certain death.
You're talking about the martyrs, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The ones who refused to compromise their beliefs, even when facing unimaginable torture.
Yeah, that's right. One of the most famous is Eleazar, an elderly scribe who was arrested and ordered to eat pork.
Oh, wow.
A violation of Jewish dietary laws.
Right.
He could have easily pretended to comply.
Right.
But he refused to betray his faith, even to save his own life.
That takes an incredible amount of courage.
It does.
I can't even imagine facing that kind of choice.
Yeah.
But wasn't there also a story about a mother and her 7 sons
Yes.
who faced a similar test?
You're right. This story is even more harrowing.
Yeah.
The 7 brothers, along with their mother, were brought before Antiochus,
Okay.
subjected to horrific tortures one by one,
Oh, wow.
in an attempt to force them to eat pork.
Jeez.
Each brother, facing this unimaginable pain, chose to die rather than violate their faith.
And their mother, I remember reading that she like encourage them to stay strong.
It's amazing.
That's a level of faith and resilience it's hard to comprehend.
It's truly inspiring. She watched her sons die one after another,
Wow.
reminding them of the hope of resurrection and urging them to remain faithful to God.
Right.
Her unwavering belief, even in the face of such unimaginable suffering, is a testament to the power of faith to sustain us through even the darkest of times.
These stories are both heartbreaking and incredibly powerful.
They are.
But it sounds like this kind of passive resistance can only go so far. At some point, wouldn't the Jewish people have to fight back more directly?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's where Judas Maccabeus enters the picture.
Okay.
He was a priest from a family known as the Hasmoneans,
Yeah.
and he became the leader of the armed rebellion against Antiochus.
Okay, so this is where things really start to heat up.
Yeah.
Judas Maccabeus is kind of a legendary figure,
Yeah.
known for his military genius and his unwavering faith.
He's definitely a pivotal character in this story.
Yeah.
Judas was a brilliant strategist, a charismatic leader.
Mm-hmm.
He managed to rally the Jewish people and achieve some stunning victories against the Seleucid army, which was much larger and better equipped.
I read that he used guerrilla warfare tactics,
Right.
which makes sense given the circumstances.
Yeah.
But didn't he also rely heavily on divine support?
Second Maccabees emphasizes that this wasn't just a fight for political independence.
Right.
This was a holy war,
Yeah.
a battle for the very soul of the Jewish people. The book describes numerous instances of divine intervention where God miraculously aids the Maccabees in battle.
So it's not just historical accounts.
Right.
There's also this strong element of faith and divine providence woven into the narrative.
Exactly. For example, during the Battle of Emmaus,
Right.
one of Judas's early victories,
Mm.
the text describes 5 heavenly horsemen descending from heaven to assist the Jewish forces.
Wow. Talk about reinforcements.
But I imagine not everyone was on board with Judas's rebellion.
You're right.
Were there factions within the Jewish community who opposed him?
The Maccabean revolt wasn't just a fight against external enemies.
Right.
It also exposed these internal divisions within Jewish society.
Yeah.
Some Jews favored accommodation with the Seleucids, seeing armed resistance as futile and dangerous.
So it was a complicated situation,
It was.
with political maneuvering and internal power struggles adding another layer of complexity to the conflict.
Definitely.
Yeah.
The sources you shared highlight this figure named Alcimus.
A former high priest who collaborated with the Seleucids,
Right.
seeing the revolt as an opportunity to regain power.
Oh, wow.
He convinced the new Seleucid king, Demetrius Soter,
Okay.
that he could restore order and maintain Seleucid control over Judea.
So Alcimus was essentially a political opportunist playing both sides to advance his own ambitions.
You could say
Sort
that
of.
his actions caused further division within the Jewish community and created a significant challenge for Judas Maccabeus,
Right.
who now had to contend with enemies both within and outside the Jewish community.
It sounds like things are about to get even more intense.
Yeah.
Judas has to deal with this powerful enemy in Antiochus, this scheming rival in Alcimus,
Right.
and a divided community.
That's right.
What happens next?
Well, to answer that question, we'll have to delve into the final part of our deep dive into the second book of Maccabees.
Okay, so we're back.
Yeah?
And the stakes are higher than ever.
Right.
Judas is leading this rebellion against a powerful empire, dealing with internal conflicts and trying to protect his people's faith. And
Yeah.
it's a lot. So where do we go from here?
Well, you shared a source that mentioned this Seleucid general named Lysias,
Okay.
and he actually tries to negotiate a peaceful settlement with the Jewish people.
Really? So it wasn't just constant warfare. There were attempts at diplomacy going on, too.
It seems so. Lysias,
Yeah.
recognizing the resilience of the Jewish resistance
Right.
and facing pressure on other fronts, realizes that a military victory might be more costly than it's worth.
Okay.
So he actually sends envoys to Jerusalem to propose terms of peace.
That's fascinating. So what were the terms? Did Judas and his followers consider accepting them?
The sources are a bit unclear on the specifics,
Okay.
but it seems like Lysias was willing to grant a degree of religious freedom to the Jews, allowing them to practice their faith
Right.
and rebuild the temple.
That sounds like a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
Why didn't Judas just accept it and end the bloodshed?
Well, remember that political situation within Judea. You've got Alcimus, that rival high priest who's aligned with the Seleucids.
Right.
He saw this as a threat to his own ambitions.
Okay.
He likely sabotaged the peace talks, arguing that Judas couldn't be trusted.
Oh, wow.
And that the rebellion posed a continuing threat to Seleucid authority.
So internal power struggles and personal ambitions interfering with the possibility of peace.
Yeah.
It's a recurring theme throughout history, isn't it?
It certainly is.
Yeah.
And in this case, it led to a continuation of the conflict.
Right.
So Lysias, swayed by Alcimus's arguments and facing pressure from other factions within the Seleucid court, ultimately abandons his efforts at diplomacy and resumes military action against Judas Maccabeus.
So back to war.
Yeah.
But the outline mentioned the Romans.
Yeah.
Where do they fit into all this?
Well, as the Maccabean revolt raged on, a new power was rising in the Mediterranean realm.
Right.
The Roman Republic, expanding its influence eastward, saw an opportunity to weaken the Seleucid Empire and gain a foothold in the region.
So they were kind of playing the long game, looking for those strategic advantages.
Exactly. The Romans weren't directly involved in the fighting.
Right.
But they offered support to Judas Maccabeus, recognizing him as like a valuable ally in their own geopolitical ambitions.
Okay.
And, they signed a treaty with Judas, promising to protect Judea from Seleucid aggression.
Wow, that's a major development.
Yeah.
Judas is playing on a whole new level now, forging alliances with international powers.
He is.
But I imagine the Seleucids weren't too happy about this Roman involvement.
You're right.
Yeah.
The Seleucid king Demetrius saw this alliance as a direct threat to his authority.
Right.
So he sends one of his most ruthless generals, a guy named Nicanor,
Oh, yeah?
back to Judea
I remember him.
with orders to crush the rebellion once and for all.
And wasn't this the same Nicanor who had tried to seize the temple treasury earlier? He must have had a real grudge against the Jews.
He certainly did.
Yeah.
Nicanor was known for his cruelty and his contempt for Judaism.
Right.
He even went so far as to threaten to destroy the temple if Judas didn't surrender.
So the stakes are incredibly high now.
They are.
Not only are the Jewish people fighting for their freedom, but they're also fighting for the survival of their most sacred site.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's in this context that we encounter the story of Rhases, a respected elder of Jerusalem, Nicanor, determined to break the spirit of the Jewish resistance, sent soldiers to arrest Rhases, hoping to use him as leverage against Judas Maccabeus.
Oh, no. What happened to Rhases?
Rather than face capture and humiliation, Rhases chose a heroic, albeit tragic end.
Oh, wow.
He fell upon his own sword, preferring death with honor to a life of captivity and compromise.
Wow, that's a powerful statement about his unwavering commitment to his faith and his people. His death must have further fueled the flames of resistance against Nicanor.
It certainly did.
Yeah.
The Jewish people, inspired by Rhases' sacrifice and facing the threat of the temple's destruction, they rallied behind Judas Maccabeus, ready to fight to the death.
So it all comes down to this final confrontation then.
It does.
Judas versus Nicanor.
The sources you shared describe this clash as one of the most decisive battles in the Maccabean revolt.
Okay.
The two armies met at a place called Adassa.
Right.
And the fighting was fierce.
I'm on the edge of my seat. Who won? What happened to Nicanor?
Judas Maccabeus, with his troops inspired by faith and a thirst for freedom, routed Nicanor's army, inflicting heavy casualties and sending the Seleucid forces into a panicked retreat.
That's amazing. Another victory for the underdog. But what about Nicanor? Surely he didn't escape this time.
No, his reign of terror came to an end on that battlefield.
Okay.
And according to 2 Maccabees, his defeat was far from glorious.
Okay.
His body was found among the slain.
Right. And Judas ordered his head and right arm to be cut off.
Wow.
And displayed in Jerusalem as like a warning to any future enemies of the Jewish people.
That's a pretty gruesome end.
It is.
But I can see how it would have served as this really powerful symbol of victory for the Jewish people.
It definitely sent a message. Nicanor's severed limbs displayed for all to see represented the defeat of tyranny and the triumph of religious freedom. The Jewish people had defended their faith, their freedom, and their sacred temple against overwhelming odds.
So what happened next? Did the fighting finally stop?
The victory at Adassa marked a turning point in the Maccabean revolt.
Okay.
With Nicanor defeated and the Seleucid army in disarray.
Right.
Judas Maccabeus was able to liberate Jerusalem and reclaim the temple, which had been desecrated by Antiochus.
It must have been an incredible moment. After years of oppression and fighting, they finally achieved their goal.
It was a time of great rejoicing and celebration.
Yeah.
The Jewish people, led by Judas Maccabeus,
cleansed and rededicated the temple, restoring it to its rightful place as the center of their religious life.
Okay.
And this event, the rededication of the temple, is what we commemorate each year with Hanukkah.
It all comes full circle. The story of the Maccabees, their struggle for religious freedom, their courage in the face of persecution, it's all connected to this holiday that's celebrated by millions around the world.
It's a powerful reminder that even a small group of determined individuals can achieve extraordinary things when they stand up for what they believe in.
Absolutely. Well, this has been an incredible journey through the second book of Maccabees.
It has.
From hidden fires to heavenly horsemen to epic battles and political intrigue.
It's all there.
It's a story that's both captivating and inspiring.
And what I find particularly powerful is how it speaks to themes that are still relevant today.
Yeah.
You know, the fight for religious freedom, the importance of resisting oppression, and the enduring power of faith and hope, even in the darkest of times.
So the next time someone asks you about Hanukkah, you can tell them it's not just about the miracle of the oil.
Right.
It's about the courage of the Maccabees, their unwavering faith, and their fight for a better world.
That's right.
It's a story that reminds us to never give up hope, to always stand up for what's right, and to remember that even a small flame can ignite a revolution.
Well said.